We continue on now to our literary corner, Korea Book Club, where we explore the world of Korean literature through works available in translation and beyond. And for that, we have joining us in the studio now our literary critic Barry Welsh. Barry, hello, it's great to see you again.
Yes, good evening.
Okay, so what do you have in store for us today?
So this evening we're reviewing a poetry collection called Nearly All Happiness. The Korean title is Koi Modern Kibum, and it's by Lee Soyoun, translated by Sunnie Chae and published by Asia Publishers as part of their K-Poetry series. And this is Lee Soyoun's first collection of poems to be translated into English, and I believe this English translation and the Korean version were basically published at the same time in mid to late 2022. So it's a new collection. And Lee made her debut in 2014 when she won the Korea Economic Daily Spring Literary Contest. And her previous collection of poems was called I Need a Girl Who Will Die Slowly. She's also written an essay collection called Water Deer and is part of a poetry collective known as Kyom. And regular listeners might remember that translator Sunnie Chae also translated Maya in Tokyo by Chang Gyu-jin, which we reviewed and were impressed by last year. And of course, we've reviewed numerous stories and poetry collections put out by Asia Publishers. And Lee's work in this volume explores several different themes, including feminism, life and death, internalized violence, and the environment. And one critic had this to say about her work: the lyrical wording and delicately wrought sentences give the poems an allure, while the variations in tone add lushness.
Right, I understand that E is known for and committed to writing about an issue in particular, and that is one you mentioned, that is feminism and gender discrimination. Is that evident in this collection too, then?
Yes, right, absolutely. So there's an excellent essay at the end of the collection where E explains her journey into awareness of gender discrimination. So she writes that in her youth, she tried to believe that, quote, male and female bodies are no different in their experience of love and passion. I used to be free in sexual expression. Lacking gender awareness, I never contemplated the gendered underpinnings of discriminatory sayings and doings. However, she goes on to write that after she left home, her home, was a very sort of safe place for her to grow up. But after she left home as a young adult, as a young woman, going to university, and so on for the first time, the world came rushing in at her, and she had several unpleasant experiences, such as lewd comments from strangers, and even a stalker, and this quickly convinced her of otherwise, and that she'd had a sort of sheltered upbringing. And she came to realise that she was living in a state of what she calls female unfreedom.
Living in a state of female unfreedom. That is quite a powerful phrase, I think. How does she highlight this unfreedom for readers, then? Right,
so it comes through it's touched upon in a few of the poems, but I think it comes through the most in a poem entitled Monstrously Feminist Man. And in this poem, he writes, and I'll quote a little section of the poem here from the first stanza. A man likes to wash, clean and cook. Once you meet and marry this man, he will be ironing blouses in a sunny room, claiming credit for it all, even for your childbirth. And then the poem continues in this very pointed and deeply critical vein of this man, these type of men, this attitude, until she concludes, I yield my every right to you. Take this holy child, that this labour of mine may now be yours. I give you my spasms of pain, uterine muscles, contractions, all that I am. No credit to me, a leeching wife. And the poem in its totality is quite a devastating and bitter condemnation and critique of the male desire to control the female experience.
Wow, indeed. The emotions seem very raw in just those few lines you quoted there, and I think it gives a glimpse into her writing on this topic. But as well as feminism and gender issues, I understand that E also writes about the environment and the natural world. Can you tell us more about this aspect of her poetry?
Right, so there's a lot of different elements and different strands and things happening in these poems. So throughout the collection, and this is one of the elements I think many readers will enjoy. I like this a lot. So she returns again and again to the imagery of the natural world, so trees and animals and fish in the sea. And she's a very good natural world or environmental poet. That type of imagery, the imagery that she uses connected to, trees and so on, that lingered with me after reading the poems. I think that many readers will have the same experience. And the imagery, it serves different purposes in different poems. So in one poem, there's a several hundred-year-old hackberry tree, and through the life of this tree, she uses that to talk about time and love and how they're connected. And then there's a poem called Imagination of the Earth, and we see what could be some kind of environmental catastrophe, and that's sort of linked to a cycle of birth and death and rebirth, or perhaps something else, just calamity. And then there's other poems where this idea of ecological disaster also arises. So in one poem she writes, "The dying earth spins, rain falls undeterred." And then in another she says, "I see a flooded world above." And in these poems, you get a sense of the vastness of the world and the sheer history of evolutionary processes, and how perhaps they could very well be spinning sort of out of control. And again she returns to imagery of trees. Trees are growing or dying or providing comfort in some way. And then in others she imagines herself as a sea creature, and in many seems to ponder the nature of evolution, even quoting at one point Steven Pinker's line, "Cheating drives evolution." And there's frequently a kind of anxiety to the imagery, or at the very least some of the imagery induced a sense of anxiety in me.
Sure. I mean, I don't think it's probably not just you. It
Right.
sounds like it is a characteristic of her work. There's one more aspect of her work that I want to ask you about. As you said, this this collection was published in 2022 last year. And I understand the COVID-19 pandemic has inspired her work as well. As we might expect, the shadow of the pandemic has had an effect on poetry written in the last couple of years in Korea and elsewhere, of course. For example, we've talked previously about Homo Mascus, Kim Soo-yeol, by Kim Soo-yeol, which prominently featured COVID-inspired poems. I believe that is also another aspect in this collection. How does COVID-19 pandemic and related issues feature here?
Right, yeah, so of course, as you would expect, such a big event that's touched everybody's life, you would expect to see that reflected in the work of poets producing poems during this period. And as with the environmental poems, that's also about another issue which affects everybody. We see that this recurring feature of books published in series that we've been reviewing selections from over the last few years, that the pandemic has been the source of inspiration for poets and for writers. And we do see that in Lee's poems as well, and in one of the essays she includes at the end of the collection. And again, the pandemic and the vaccine in these poems, they sort of serve as this general anxiety-inducing experience, uncertainty-inducing experience. So, for example, in a poem called Fist, she writes that neighbourhood doctors jokingly say, "Were this a clinical trial, the vaccine would be a flop. Today I get my booster shot." And it's a poem that's deeply ambivalent about the reactions to the pandemic and the experience of going through the pandemic. But again, it's a very interesting poem, and inspired by this event that's obviously affected all of us. But overall, it's a fascinating collection of poems. It touches on a lot of different issues of contemporary concern. It's full of beguiling imagery, and for many, I'm sure it will leave a very strong impression.
Yeah, indeed. It sounds like a collection with a lot to unpack for readers. I feel there's a lot that readers will get out of it. It's called Nearly All Happiness by Lee Soyoun. And that's all for Korea Book Club today, Barry. Thank you for that thoughtful review, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Okay, take care.